let's move over to Tirzepatide, which I got great experiences out of. And even though this medication is quite expensive, even more expensive than liraglutide, dulaglutide, or semaglutide, at least from the source that I got it from, I would say that it's worth it. So let's dive in, shall we? Now, from my personal experience, running tesofensine for approximately 2 weeks at a dose of 0.5 milligrams per day, the initial first 3 days are, I would consider to be the most effective. So even though it has a reasonably long half-life, I got the best effect the first 3 days, after which I felt that I was getting used to tesofensine. Now, I have to warn you guys, I discontinued fluvoxamine, let's say 2 months ahead of this tesofensine experiment. And you got to keep in mind that I discontinued the fluvoxamine, this SSRI, cold turkey. So I had a boatload of side effects, which I had to slowly, grow out of just by abstinence. And it might mean that some of my 5-HT receptors are still somewhat downregulated, discombobulated, not responding in a normal method to an SNDRI, whereas normal people would respond to them, because again, some of my receptors might not be very responsive to the medications like this. So even though in the first 3 days I got a pretty good response, it felt like I was taking a combination of a low dose modafinil, Adderall, and Adderall XR, that's the extended release, and sibutramine, for the guys that ever experimented with sibutramine, which is another appetite suppressant, which is an SNRI, so serotonin noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor based appetite suppressant, which actually got discontinued, 2010, because sibutramine had an increased risk for cardiovascular events. So I've experimented with phentermine and sibutramine in the past. And as soon as I started with tesofensine, I got a little bit of a hint of modafinil, a hint of Adderall, and a hint of sibutramine. So I felt more cognitively inclined. Could be because tesofensine has been shown to have a little bit of effect on the cholinergic system. So you might get a nootropic-like effect from tesofensine supplementation. It felt very similar to modafinil in the sense that modafinil has some serotonergic and dopaminergic effects. So the mood was increased, the productivity was increased. I felt a little bit more driven to get my work done. And in the context of a low-dose extended release Adderall, I felt that my overall energy levels and a little bit of this, methamphetamine tingling sensations, probably coming from the increased noradrenaline concentrations that tesofensine potentiates. In a similar sense to Adderall, I felt that way on tesofensine. And sibutramine, it's been a very long time since I've used sibutramine, so all I could say is that it's very comparable in the sense that tesofensine makes you a little bit uneasy, similar to how sibutramine does that. So I would say that, from my personal experience, it's basically a combination of those three medications or drugs. But regarding appetite suppression, the first 3 days I felt moderate appetite suppression, but after that, for the remaining 11, 12 days that I ran tesofensine, the appetite suppression was basically zero. Now, I mostly went by my appetite. So I had my diet structured, and then I wanted to see if I felt inclined to eat a little bit more at the end of the day. So I had my regular diet laid out, 0.5 milligrams tesofensine upon waking, doing all of my daily chores, my daily fasted cardio, making all my meals, going to the gym, etc., etc., etc. At the end of the day, in most cases, I was still hungry. And, besides the regular fruit bowl that I have post-workout, I felt inclined to eat a little bit more, whether that was an extra meal or perhaps some mixed nuts, maybe 100 grams, which is, of course, very calorically dense, or having the occasional 7-Eleven midnight binge run. Unfortunately, that still occurred on tesofensine. I did not experience any of the gastrointestinal upset or digestive issues that some people have. I've sat next to people running a similar dose of tesofensine for already maybe a month in duration. And then you go to a restaurant and they're, painstakingly picking the protein out of their food, leaving all the vegetables or leaving all the rice. It's like they have zero appetite. So they can't even eat, but, the inner bodybuilder tells them to eat the protein and, drink a little bit of fluid. But, it's a real struggle for them. And I sit next to them eating the same meal, but eating double the quantity and then finishing their meals also on tesofensine. So maybe it's just something uniquely to me that I could just eat, right? And I've tried modafinil, I've tried Adderall, I've tried trimipramine, and I would say those three, just by themselves at a low dose, are more beneficial for appetite suppression than the tesofensine for the long duration that I got from it. When I discontinued the tesofensine, I got slight withdrawal symptoms similar to discontinuing fluvoxamine, but that was certainly not as intense. So, okay, I'm going to be honest, I switched from tesofensine straight to tirzepatide, and after 2 administrations of that, I got way better appetite suppression compared to the tesofensine. So I've basically half a bottle of tesofensine lying around here. No, that's not for you to take. Maybe in the future I will run tesofensine maybe 1 day a week, because the cognitive benefits and the stimulatory benefits were actually quite pleasant. And I got that from a low dose of 0.5 milligrams within an hour of use. So I might use this as a nootropic going forward, but definitely not as an appetite suppressant. Now, that's just my personal experience. Again, I've talked to many people out there who've used tesofensine as an appetite suppressant and gotten great results out of it. Some of them ran that for weeks to months in duration and got a ton of fat loss or body weight reduction out of that. But me personally, I got exactly 0 kilograms lost. 0. So I'll leave it there, right? Let's move over to tirzepatide, which I got great experiences out of. And even though this medication is quite expensive, even more expensive than liraglutide, dulaglutide, or semaglutide, at least from the source that I got it from, I would say that it's worth it. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's start with the quick facts. Tirzepatide is available under the brand name Mounjaro, produced by Eli Lilly, but it's also available as a generic on various gray area peptide websites. Tirzepatide is a combination glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist, as well as a glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide receptor agonist, GIP. So Mounjaro, tirzepatide, is the only GLP-1 and GIP receptor agonist which is currently available as a pharmaceutically approved medication. Again, in the treatments of type 2 diabetes, it's off-labelly used for appetite suppression. That's not what it's currently FDA approved for, but there are several clinical trials which Mounjaro tirzepatide is currently being investigated for obesity management. So keep that in mind. Using this for an appetite suppression effect is currently off-label purposes. Now again, GLP-1 receptor agonists like liraglutide, dulaglutide, or semaglutide with various half-lives are highly beneficial, highly effective. Liraglutide to this day is still one of my favorite appetite suppressants. I've used pens upon pens upon pens upon pens and spent thousands of dollars to help with appetite suppression from liraglutide at various dosages from 0.6 to 1.8 milligrams per day. I've used semaglutide several times before going on holidays at a single administration of 1 to 2 milligrams, which seems to be effective for 1 week up until 10 days, give or take, after which the effects kind of start to dissipate. The problem with semaglutide in a single dose and the problem with tirzepatide in a single dose is that you get terrible nausea and gastrointestinal upset for the first couple of days after the single administration. And then, you get to a bliss point, the beneficial effects where you have good appetite suppression, but no nausea and no gastrointestinal upset. And then slowly the appetite kind of starts to return and you get, very poor appetite management. And especially if you do this on a diet towards the end of the week when you're already getting hungry and you already start to get depleted, you're getting closer to your planned refeed or cheat meal. This is where the diet starts to get tough. So what I've noticed and what Derek More Plates, More Dates mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago on the Super Physiological Man podcast, why not dose these drugs like, a long-acting testosterone enanthate or other medications that we like to do daily micro-administrations of. Instead of doing 1 or 2 injections per week, you do maybe 3 administrations, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or daily administration. So that's what I've been doing, 1 milligram tirzepatide, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Again, now we're already going into the dosing protocol. So let's stick with the quick facts.